Annihilation left a lot of viewers with the same reaction. That ending is beautiful, terrifying, and impossible to pin down. But I do not think the ending is vague in the way people often claim. I think it is strange, but specific. Not specific in a clean plot mechanics way where every answer gets labeled and boxed up, but specific in what it is saying about the identity, guilt, and self-destruction and transformation. Alex Garland has said his interest in the story was tied to the idea that everybody is self-destructive, and that he has described the film in terms of psychological and molecular self-destruction, mirroring each other. So my argument is this. Annihilation is not really asking who is real in the simple sci-fi sense. It is asking what counts as self once a person has been broken apart, mirrored, rewritten, and carried forward in altered form. And the reason the ending lands so hard is that the film frames this whole journey through Lena, a narrator who is never as stable as she first appears. The script itself ends on the exchange. Are you Kane? I don't know. Then are you Lena? The final question is not random. It is the film finally turning in its deepest concern back onto the person who has been guiding us through the story all along. The movie is not a report. It is a confession. Hi, I'm Rob, and this is The Constantly Racing Mind. This is the channel where we explore sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek. Because every frame tells a story, and with Annihilation, every frame feels like it is hiding something alive, something broken, and something waiting to become something else. Full spoiler warning for Annihilation from this point forward. So if you have not seen the film, this is your chance to pause, watch it, and come back, because we are going straight into the plot, the themes, and the ending. Annihilation follows Lena, a biologist and former soldier whose husband, Kane, returns home after disappearing on a secret military mission into a place known as the Shimmer. But the man who comes back is clearly not the same. He is distant, confused, and physically breaking down. After he collapses, Lena is taken to a government facility where she learns that Kane had entered the Shimmer, a quarantined zone created by a strange extraterrestrial presence near a lighthouse, and that almost no one who goes inside ever returns, seemingly in the southern United States, possibly Florida. Wanting answers and carrying far more guilt than the film first lets on, Lena joins a new expedition into the Shimmer led by Dr. Ventress, alongside Josie Raddick, Cass Shepard, and Anya Thornton. Once inside, they find a world where everything is being refracted and rewritten. Plants take on human forms. Animals mutate into terrifying hybrids. Time, memory, and even biology stop behaving in normal ways. As the team moves deeper into the zone, each woman begins to break down in ways that connect to the personal damage she brought in with her. Cass is killed by a mutant bear that later screams with her voice. Josie ultimately seems to surrender to the Shimmer and dissolve into it. Anya descends into paranoia and violence after the group discovers one of the earlier expedition members had his insides altered in grotesque ways. And Ventress, already dying of cancer, presses forward to the lighthouse, consumed by the need to understand what is happening. When Lena finally reaches the lighthouse, she discovers a recording showing that the real Kane killed himself there with a phosphorus grenade, and that another Kane, a double, emerged afterwards and returned home in his place. Inside the lighthouse, Lena encounters Ventress as she is absorbed into a strange luminous force, and then comes face to face with a humanoid being that mirrors her movements and gradually takes on her form. Lena uses a grenade to trigger a fire that destroys the lighthouse and causes the Shimmer to collapse. At the end, Lena returns and reunites with Kane, but neither of them can fully confirm who or what they are anymore. When they embrace, their eyes shimmer, suggesting that whatever happened inside the Shimmer did not simply end when it disappeared. One of the most important things about Annihilation is how it is framed. Lena is not telling the story from a place of safety or objectivity. She's under containment. She's being observed. She is separated behind glass and debriefed after the expedition. That structure matters because it tells us immediately that what we are about to get is not some neutral, all-seeing account. It is a testimony from someone who has already passed through something that may have changed her. The film presents the story through a retrospective debriefing, which means that we are watching is already filtered through Lena's memory, guilt, and damaged sense of self. And once the film reveals Lena's affair, that debriefed frame changes shape. It stops feeling like a clinical report and starts feeling more like a confession. Lena is not just explaining what happened in the Shimmer. She is telling the story after betraying Kane, after seeing him disappear, after watching him come back changed, and after deciding to follow him into the same place that destroyed him. So when she speaks, she is not just recounting events. She is trying to account for herself. That is why the emotional logic of the movie matters more than a simple timeline of what happened. Lena is not merely our witness. She is part of the thing the movie is trying to diagnose. That is also why I think unreliable narrative is more useful than ambiguous ending. The film is not saying nothing can be known. It's saying that the person telling the story is compromised, and that identity itself becomes unstable by the end. Garland has talked about the film in terms of overwhelming experiences that change us so deeply that the person who walks in is not the person who walks out. That framework fits Lena perfectly. Even if the broad facts of what she says are true, the witness is still unstable. And once the witness is unstable, the movie's real subject becomes the self of the narrator, not just the mystery of the environment. Lena enters the Shimmer as self-punishment, not rescue. On the surface, Lena joins the mission because Kane is dying. That is the clean version, and the movie allows that explanation to exist. But if you listen to her language carefully, it points somewhere darker. In the screenplay, Lena says, "He is my husband, he's dying." Then she adds, "The chances are zero if I don't even try. I owe it to him." That phrase is everything. "I owe it to him." It's not rescue language, it's debt language. And once the affair is part of the story, that debt becomes moral and emotional at the same time. Lena does love Kane. I do not think the film denies that for a second. But love is not the only thing driving her. She has already destabilized the marriage. She already carries guilt. Then Kane comes back from the Shimmer, physically present but emotionally wrong, like someone she knows and does not know at the same time. So when Lena chooses to go in, it no longer reads like clean heroism. It reads like guilt, finding a path toward punishment. The film itself supports that reading through Dr. Ventress. In one of the most important speeches in the movie, Ventress says almost none of us commit suicide, but almost all of us self-destruct in some way, through drinking, drugs, wrecking a career, or destabilizing a marriage. The film explicitly notes Lena's reaction to the line. Garland has said the film is certainly concerned with self-destruction, and Ventress is where the movie says that out loud. From that point forward, Lena's mission is no longer just about trying to save Kane. It is about someone carrying guilt into a landscape that externalizes self-destruction. So I do not think Lena walks into the Shimmer because she believes she can simply fix what is broken. I think she walks in because guilt has made the Shimmer feel like the only honest place left for her to go. She cannot undo the affair. She cannot undo Kane's change. She cannot separate love from damage anymore. But she can step into the place that broke him. That is why the mission plays less like rescue and more like penance. The Shimmer does not invent people's damage. It refracts it. This is the core idea that explains almost everything in the film. The Shimmer is not just a weird alien zone where random, impossible things happen. The movie goes out of its way to define it through the idea of refraction. Light is refracted there. DNA is refracted there. Species boundaries blur. Memory and behavior blur. Things do not simply die or survive. They are split, bent, recombined, and carried forward in altered form. That language comes directly from the film, and the and the script. And Garland's interviews reinforce it by describing the movie as a story where molecular self-destruction mirrors psychological self-destruction. That is why I think the best way to read The Shimmer is this. It does not transform healthy people into something else from nothing. It reveals the fracture that they were already carrying and gives them material form. Each member of the mission goes in with damage. Not cartoon damage, human damage. Grief, illness, loneliness, despair, self-erasure. Ventress is already dying. Josie is already marked by self-harm. Cass carries grief. Lena carries betrayal and guilt. The Shimmer does not create those wounds. It externalizes them. That is also why the film feels more like horror than pure science fiction. In a normal sci-fi mystery, the question is what the alien force is doing to people. In Annihilation, the more disturbing question is what people are already doing to themselves before the alien force ever got there. The Shimmer simply makes it visible in a way no one can deny. The bear is the first real lesson in how the ending works. The bear scene is one of the most famous horror sequences in the movie, and for good reason. But I think it matters just as much. Philosophically, as it does viscerally, the bear that attacks the group is not just a monster. It carries Cass's scream inside itself. The Shimmer has taken a fragment of her and reassigned it to something else. That is the rule of the place in one horrifying image. Pain does not vanish here. It gets repurposed. Human damage gets redistributed, not into altered forms. So when the bear screams with Cass's voice, the film is teaching us how to read the world. The Shimmer does not simply erase people. It keeps pieces. It refracts them. It gives them a new body. That is why I think the bear is more than a jump scare set piece. It is grief made audible. It is the movie demonstrating that wounds can survive the person and return in a form that is both familiar and wrong. And once you see that, the ending stops looking like a random left turn. The bear is a preview of the Lighthouse. Cass's screams survive in a mutated animal. Later, identity itself will survive in a mutated human form. The scale changes, but the rules do not. The Shimmer takes what is already there and carries it forward in altered form. The bear tells you early that the movie is not about destruction alone. It's about destruction fused with continuation. Kane's double matters more than Lena's. This is one of the biggest keys to the ending. If Lena's double were the only doubling in the film, then the final act could still be read as late-breaking mind-bender or a symbolic hallucination. But Garland does something much smarter than that. He gives us Kane first. And because he gives us Kane first, he gives us the rules of the ending before Lena even reaches the lighthouse. On the lighthouse tape, the real Kane looks into the camera, asks that a message be delivered to Lena, pulls the pin on a phosphorus grenade, and dies. Then another Kane steps into frame. The order is crucial. First, the original dies. Then the double appears. That means the film has already shown us, in straightforward narrative terms, that continuity can persist without preserving identity in a stable way. The plot has already crossed that line before Lena faces her own mirror. That makes Kane's double more important than Lena's in one key sense. Kane is the proof of concept. Lena is the emotional confrontation. Kane tells us what the Shimmer can do. Lena shows us what that means. Without Kane, Lena's final encounter could still be dismissed as pure symbolism. With Kane, the movie has already grounded duplication and continuity in the narrative. So when the film later leaves it unclear whether Lena lived and which Lena died, that uncertainty lands because Kane has already prepped us to accept the identity fracture as a fact of this world. Kane also matters more because he is the wound that sends Lena into the Shimmer. Lena does not enter because she is chasing an abstract mystery. She enters because the man she loves has already come back as something she cannot fully name. He is there, but not fully there. He is familiar, but estranged. Kane collapses identity inside intimacy before Lena ever reaches the lighthouse. Her final confrontation only deepens a crisis that Kane has already brought home. The Lighthouse video is the real ending before the ending. I think this is one of the clearest sections in the whole film. The Lighthouse video is where Annihilation stops hinting and quietly tells you the truth. Not the full philosophical meaning yet, but the core plot truth. We see the original Kane die, then we see another Kane step into the frame. That is a revelation that unlocks the rest of the movie. From that point on, the question is not whether replacement or continuation through copy is possible. The film has already shown it that it is. That is why I call the tape the real ending before the ending. Everything after it still matters deeply. Lena's encounter with the humanoid matter, the final exchange matters, the embrace matters. But the tape is the moment where the movie resolves its central narrative mystery and shifts to the deeper question. It moves from what happened to what does this mean for identity. The tape gives you the fact. The final scene gives you the meaning. It also matters that Kane's death is not framed like a conventional murder. He chooses annihilation. Then the double continues. That is the film's thesis in compressed form. A self can end. Continuity can persist anyway. That is not a simple clone twist. It is a paradox the whole movie is built around. And once you understand that, Lena's final confrontation becomes less about solving a mystery and more about facing what the movie has already told us is true. Why Lena's double does not attack her like an enemy. This is where the film becomes something much stranger than a normal horror showdown. The humanoid in the lighthouse does not rush Lena the way a predator would. It does not behave like a slasher, a beast, or even a conventional alien attacker. Instead, it mirrors her. The screenplay makes that explicit. Garland writes that the humanoid is mimicking her and that she is fighting herself. It raises the opposite hand when she raises hers. It reflects her movement with exactness. It becomes her shape through total synchronization. Now, that choice changes everything because once the double mirrors rather than attacks, the scene stops being about predator and prey. It becomes about recognition. A normal attack would preserve distance. There would still be a clear line between Lena and the threat. But the double removes that. Every moment she makes comes back to her. Every attempt at action gets absorbed into a mirrored pattern. The threat has her shape because the point is not that something outside Lena wants to destroy her. The point is that destruction here is intimate. It comes from within, the structure of the self. And that is why I think the doppelganger scene is not the best read as the Shimmer creating a random copy of Lena. It is the final form of the film's argument that self-destruction and transformation are already intertwined. The double does not need to behave like an external enemy because Lena's deepest conflict was never purely external. By the lighthouse, the difference between Lena's internal fracture and the Shimmer's external process has collapsed. The double becomes her because the movie wants to show us that the self she brought into the Shimmer was already unstable before she ever got there. Now the final question comes last for a reason. A lot of viewers remember Annihilation as if it begins by openly asking whether Lena is still Lena. But structurally that is not what Garland does. He lets Lena tell the whole story first. He lets us move through the Shimmer with her. Only then, at the very end, does the movie turn and ask the question and destabilize everything that we have just watched. Lena asks,
"You're okay?"
He says, "I don't know."
I don't think so.
Then he asks,
Are you Lena?
That is a brilliant structural move because it turns the entire film retroactive. If that question came first, the movie would play more like a standard identity puzzle. But because it comes last, it forces us to reinterpret the witness after the testimony is already complete. It tells us that the story we have just received may be broadly true in events, but unstable in identity. The witness is part of the mystery now, and that is why I think the film is less interested in asking, did Lena get copied, than in asking, was Lena already fracturing before the lighthouse? Once you understand the self-destruction theme, that second question becomes much more powerful. The movie is not just concerned with a science fiction event. It is concerned with whether identity was already in the process of breaking down through guilt, betrayal, silence, and self-punishment before the Shimmer ever made it real. The ending is not asking who is real. It's asking what counts as self. This is the point where all the threads come together. Most ending explainers get stuck on the wrong question. They want to know which Lena is the real Lena, whether Kane is the real Kane, whether the original survived, whether the copy escaped. Those questions are fair, but they are too small for what this movie is actually after. Because by the time we get to the end, real is no longer the most important category. The Lighthouse tape has already broken the old logic. The original Kane dies. Another Kane continues. So physically, continuity and identity are already separate. After that, asking which one is real begins to miss the deeper problem. The more disturbing question is, if something has your form, your voice, your gestures, your emotional residue, and some continuity with your inner life, but not stable, original identity, what exactly is that? And what does it mean to call it a self? This is where Garland's framing becomes essential. He talks about intense subjective experiences changing us so profoundly that the person who walks in is not the person who walks out. That is not just a line about aliens, it's a line about transformation and the instability of identity itself. So the ending is not simply asking us to sort originals from copies, it is asking us whether the self was ever as fixed and clearly bounded as we wanted to believe. That is why the ending is so upsetting. It does not say identity disappears. It says identity may continue in unstable form. Something remains of Lena, something remains of Kane, but it does not remain untouched. The self persists after fracture, and that is much harder to face than a simple replacement twist. Replacement would be easy. Transformation with continuity is much worse. The shimmer in their eyes is acknowledgement, not just infection. I would be careful here because the final shot absolutely does signal alteration, but I do not think the best reading is to treat the eyes like a simple infection marker, as if the film is saying they caught some alien disease, and that is the whole point. The movie has spent too much time defining the shimmer through refraction, mimicry, recombination, and identity instability for the ending to collapse into basic contamination reveal. So I think the better reading is acknowledgement. The shimmer in their eyes is not just there to tell us something entered them biologically, it's there to confirm that both of them are now exist on the far side of the same process. They have been altered by the shimmer's logic. They have passed through transformation, and they recognize something of that in each other. That is why the final scene plays so quietly. If Garland wanted a cheap monster ending sting, he could have played it with panic, violence, or a sudden reveal beat. Instead, he gives us uncertainty, tenderness, and mutual recognition. I think that choice matters. The point is not to watch out the infection has escaped. The point is that neither of them is untouched anymore, and both of them know it. The shimmer is collapsing as a physical environment, but its logic survives in them. And the final embrace is the most disturbing moment in the film. I think this is the moment where Annihilation becomes the most terrifying, and not because of its loudest or most visually aggressive scene. It's the quietest. Up until then, the movie gives us horror in forms we can recognize. Mutated animals, body horror, strange landscapes, identity confusion, the uncanny dance with the double. But the final embrace does something worse. It takes all that anxiety about identity and compresses it into the most human gesture possible. By the time Lena and Kane hold each other, neither of them can confirm who they are in a stable way. The original Kane is dead. Lena's status has been destabilized by the Lighthouse, and yet the film does not end with violence. It ends with closeness. That is what makes it so difficult to shake. The horror is no longer only out there in the shimmer. It has come home and taken the shape of intimacy. That final embrace is disturbing because it preserves tenderness after certainty has collapsed. If the movie ended with a fight, we could still imagine the threat as something outside the relationship. But the embrace puts the threat inside the relationship itself. The person holding you may still be the person you love, or may not. And the film refuses to separate those possibilities cleanly. This is much more unsettling than a monster attack because it turns ontological uncertainty into something intimate. Why Lena's story is less about facts than about self-reckoning. And when I say the film functions like a confession, this is what I mean. Lena is not just trying to tell us where everyone went and what the alien did. She is trying to navigate what her own choices mean. The affair matters. Kane's return matters. Ventress's speech matters. The "I owe it to him" line matters. These are not just backstory details. They are the emotional architecture of the movie. They tell us that Lena's journey through the Shimmer is also a journey through guilt and self-recognition. So even when the film is showing mutated plants or uncanny creatures, the deeper drama is still Lena facing what she brought in with her. That is why the double works. That is why the tape works. That is why the final question works. The Shimmer is the environment, but Lena's fractured self is the real subject. Annihilation is a horror film about becoming. And this, to me, is the final answer. Annihilation is not mainly a horror film about invasion. It is not mainly a horror film about infection. And it is not even mainly a horror film about replacement in the simple body snatcher sense. It is a horror film about becoming, about what it means to continue after the self has been altered so deeply that the old categories no longer hold. Alex Garland has repeatedly framed the film around self-destruction and transformation, and the script keeps returning to refraction rather than annihilation as simple erasure. That is why the movie is so haunting. Becoming is harder to process than dying. Dying ends the question. Becoming extends it. It lets something carry forward, but not clearly, not securely, not as the same thing. The Shimmer does not just wipe life out. It rewrites it. It takes what is already there and pushes it into an altered form. That is true for plants, animals, voices, bodies, and finally, cells. So the real horror of Annihilation is not that Lena and Kane may no longer be the originals in the strict sense. The real horror is that something of them may still remain, just not in a stable form that we know how to name. The self does not simply disappear, it continues differently. And once the film gets you to sit with that possibility, the ending stops being a puzzle and becomes something much more unsettling. A recognition that identity may be porous, unstable, and always more vulnerable to change than we want to admit. So what really happened to Lena? The simplest answer is that she survived physically but not unchanged. But the deeper answer is that Annihilation does not treat unchanged survival as a meaningful possibility in the first place. Lena entered the Shimmer already fractured by betrayal, guilt, and self-destruction. The Shimmer did not invent that damage, it refracted it, it gave it shape, it turned it into a world where grief can scream from inside a bear, where a husband can die and still return, where a double does not attack like an enemy, because the self it mirrors was already unstable before the mirroring began. And this is why the ending is not really asking whether Lena was copied. It is asking what counts as Lena after that kind of transformation. And that final embrace is so disturbing because the movie's answer is neither nothing nor everything. Something remains, something recognizable, something intimate, but not untouched. In the end, Annihilation is not a story about a woman solving an alien mystery. It is a story about a woman confronting the possibility that self-destruction and transformation are already intertwined, and that becoming something else may not begin with the alien at all. It may begin in the quiet ways we fracture ourselves long before we ever enter the Shimmer. And weirdly enough, one of the closest emotional companions to Annihilation is We Bury the Dead, because both films send guilt-ridden wives into death-altered spaces to confront husbands they already failed before the horror even began. The parallel that really jumped out at me is that both Ava and Lena are carrying guilt for cheating on their husbands before those husbands vanish into transformed spaces tied to death. So in both films, the journey is not just about love or rescue. It's about guilt. It's about trying to walk back into the damage after it's already too late. So by the time each woman reaches her husband, what she finds is not restoration, it is confirmation that the relationship was already broken before the horror made that break literal. And if I'm going to do a real deep dive on Annihilation, I have to stop for a moment and talk about Alex Garland, because he has done far too much for modern sci-fi to treat him like just another director with a cool visual style. Garland first broke out as a novelist with The Beach, then became one of the defining screenwriters behind films like 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Never Let Me Go, and Dread, before stepping fully into directing with Ex Machina, Annihilation, Devs, Men, and more recently Civil War. And what makes him so important is that he does not use science fiction just to build worlds. He uses it to interrogate human beings. AI in Ex Machina becomes a question about consciousness and control. Determinism in Devs becomes a question about free will. And in Annihilation, alien mutation becomes a way of talking about grief, self-destruction, and transformation. Garland has even said what drew him to Annihilation was the preoccupation with the fact that everybody is self-destructive. And that matters because once you know that, the film stops looking like a puzzle box and starts looking like exactly what Garland has always been great at: using sci-fi to expose something broken, unstable, and deeply human underneath the genre's surface. And the big reason Annihilation works as well as it does is the cast. The film asks its actors to play grief, guilt, detachment, fear, and in some cases, a kind of quiet surrender, all while staying grounded inside material that could have easily drifted into pure sci-fi abstraction. Natalie Portman carries the film as Lena, and her performance is one of the main reasons the movie holds together emotionally. She does not play Lena as openly dramatic for most of the runtime. Instead, she keeps her guarded, analytical, and emotionally compressed. That restraint matters because it lets the guilt, confusion, and self-protective distance sit under the surface until the deeper the film goes. The more those fractures start to show, Portman has to be both the audience's guide and the person the movie is quietly interrogating, and she pulls that off pretty well. Natalie Portman's career arc is pretty remarkable. She broke out as a child in Leon the Professional, became globally known as Padme Amidala in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, then moved into more mature and prestige work with films like Closer, V for Vendetta, Black Swan, Jackie, and Annihilation. And of course winning a Best Actress Oscar for Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan. Oscar Isaac has less screen time, but he also leaves a very strong impression as Kane. What makes his performance effective is that he has to play several versions of absence. Before the mission, Kane already feels emotionally remote in some of Lena's memories. After he returns, Isaac makes him feel physically present but somehow unreachable, which gives the character an eerie sadness long before the film fully explains why. He's not playing a big horror transformation. He's playing disconnection, and that is what makes Kane so unsettling. And it's also worth noting the Star Wars overlap here. Portman is forever tied to the prequels, and Isaac will later carry major sequel trilogy energy as Poe Dameron. I remember Jennifer Jason Leigh from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but here, Jennifer Jason Leigh is excellent as Dr. Ventress. She gives the character a cold, composed, almost terminal calm that makes her feel like someone already halfway beyond ordinary human fear. Leigh does not overplay Ventress as sinister or warm. She plays her as someone hollowed out by illness and obsession, which makes her feel both authoritative and strangely ghost-like. She is one of the reasons the film's themes land so directly, especially in the self-destruction conversation. Then you have the rest of the women on the expedition, and they all help give the team distinct emotional textures without needing huge amounts of exposition. Tessa Thompson as Josie brings a softness and fragility to the film that becomes more important as things get stranger. Tuva Novotny as Cass gives the group some of its most human grounding early on, which makes what happens to her hit harder. Gina Rodriguez as Anya brings volatility, force, and rising paranoia, which becomes crucial once the team starts to unravel from within. And then there's Benedict Wong, in a smaller but important role as Lomax, the one conducting Lena's debrief at the beginning and the end. He does not get a whole lot of screen time, but he matters structurally because his presence reinforces the whole story as being filtered through containment, questioning, and aftermath. Wong helps frame the movie like testimony instead of straightforward adventure narrative, and it becomes very important once you start reading Lena as a compromised witness rather than a neutral narrator. And if you've made it this far, subscribe to A Constantly Racing Mind for more deep dives into sci-fi, horror, prop culture, and all things geek. Because here, every frame tells a story. Also, check out the merch store for intelligent moviegoer apparel. And let me know, was Lena changed, replaced, or was the film asking a deeper question about what a self even is? Drop your theory on Annihilation below and let me know what you think really came back from the Shimmer. And I will catch you in the next breakdown. Take care.